We want to know, where did you go to high school?
Yeah, you should always be prepared to answer that question when you're meeting someone new in St. Louis.
But why is that? And where'd you go to high school? Why is that such a big deal and a question here?
I don't know. It really threw me for a loop when I moved to St. Louis, but we do know a historian who knows the answer. We'll learn more when Raffi joins us next on this very special That's So High School Halloween show. Is in session this Halloween morning, but here in St. Louis, school is always top of mind because the question everyone wants to know is, where'd you go to high school? As you can see, I'm a proud Flora High School graduate. Go FHS! But why? Why is this such a popular question here in the Gateway City? I don't know, but we know someone who does. Local historian Raffi Andonian. Happy Halloween, Raffi.
Hey, happy Halloween. Representing my high school.
I like it. Zoo Magnet, which we're going to get to that in a moment. But since you are a historian, this is something that has always boggled my mind. Why do St. Louisans always ask, where'd you go to high school?
The most common story from a book called Where'd You Go to High School, written by someone that used to work at the History Museum here locally, is that it is from Prom Magazine. So Prom Magazine was a publication from 1947 to 1972, so it had a 25-year run, and think of it like the Facebook of its day. Really, think about it like a social media. So to give you an idea, what's in there is what kind of stuff you find in social media. And Facebook, remember, started originally for college kids to share with each other. So college, high school, different things, but school kids sharing each other, right? They would share photos of socials, student-created content, student reporters that were often given camera, and they go in and they show like their dances and their gossip and things like that, kinds of stuff you would do on social media. And the other thing that's really funny about that is advertising grew on there over time as a result of the audience growing. They claimed they had more than 90% of high school students reading that magazine. So what would happen is when you meet each other as kids, you would say, hey, what high school did you go to? And try to find each other in there, because almost 80 high schools were submitting stories into that magazine.
But those are 80 high schools across the country.
No, these are all
just
here in
in
St. Louis area. That's all in St. Louis area. And so think of it like this. When you ask that and you try to find each other, it's not that different than today. If you say, hey, what's your Insta? And you try to find each other on Instagram, right? And then what do you find on there? Photos of yourself doing social things, chit-chatting, comments, similar kind of idea.
So then why, since this magazine went out of publication 50 years ago, why is high school still such a big deal here in our area?
Yeah, so because that's the St. Louis publication, the memory of it, the habit of it continues to reinforce why high school is so important. But there's a couple of other things I will point to. One kind of more esoteric and more kind of underground. On a bigger picture, the most influential architect for school architecture across the country comes from right here in St. Louis, believe it or not. His name is William Ittner. He hated going to school in the 19th century. He thought those three-story brick buildings that we typically associate with school were not all that beautiful. So, and part of it is because classrooms were in the center, not on the side, so then the window light wouldn't come in. So it's like, it's dark, it's dingy, I don't want this kind of place for class. So he later went on to be an architect, went to Cornell, came back to St. Louis, got hired to design a bunch of schools. He designed 50 schools across St. Louis, believe it or not, would go on to design 500 schools across 28 states. And what he was known for is design that had a lot of outdoor space and design inside that had the classrooms on the perimeter to lay them out more, to have natural light come in, and also better for exit, by the way, in emergency. So he thought you should make these civic monuments. But the other thing I would point to is the story of, for example, Sumner High School. The reason I point there is because Ittner actually designed Sumner High School, believe it or not. But Sumner High School was critical, and still is. I was actually on the Ville's website, and I saw on there that they said Sumner High School is critical to the identity of our neighborhood, still is. And so Sumner and the identification of the black history at Sumner and in the neighborhood as a place that was a black middle class in the late 19th century, that had a place where you could buy a home where you might not be able to elsewhere, having millionaires that were there, having, of course, later famous people come out of that, Chuck Berry, the Tuskegee Airmen, plenty of people. Yeah. But that association, when the black population grew from 4,000 in pre-slavery by 1880 to more than 40,000, so tenfold, that association is really what I would also put in it, because you can't tell the story of black history in St. Louis without telling the story of those high schools. Later, of course, Vashon High School comes up, and Vashon was the second high school And Vashon was kind of on the other side of town because of the growing black population in St. Louis. So those two, of course, go on to be rivals. So that association at the community level, at those neighborhoods, and the larger influence of St. Louis architecture across the country, I would say, is why it continues building on the magazine's past.
And we are so lucky that a zoo magnet high school grad from
North Hollywood High School
in California
That's
and
right.
this Florida, Illinois girl could sit down
Believe
together
it or not,
on
my
this
background,
Halloween morning.
real quick, believe it or not, my background was, it's called Zoo Magnet because it was animal science and zoology was the focus. Now here I am as a historian.
And we are so glad you're a historian because he always brings the energy and the details. I had no idea. Happy Halloween to you.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
And friends, you can find this segment on firstalertfor.com/greatday following the show.